There we go, gentlemen. How are you?
Hi,
Yeah,
David.
both of you at the same time in the same place,
Come on.
like true brothers.
Man, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to see you guys.
It's very nice to see you as well.
Appreciate you doing this big time, man. It's awesome.
Oh God,
Congratulations on the record.
thanks, man. Well, then thanks for having us. This is a total thrill for us.
Oh well, as you know, I'm a fan. I've been a fan since we first met. Since the first time we played together in Winnipeg, I felt like we were like, you know, musical brethren right away on that workshop stage. We started playing, and I was just like, these guys are totally into the music that I love, and they do it so well and so naturally. I was super jealous, but I friggin' loved everything about it. I've been a fan ever since.
Oh
Eh,
man, well that feeling is super mutual, and I'll never forget that was the day that you and Michael Bernard Fitzgerald had a rap off.
Yeah, we did Drake, I think, right?
You did, yeah.
He took it to Rap Town.
He did.
But I was trying to keep the R&B vocals pretty fresh, but he can go there. He can go
He,
there. I've heard him do that a number of times. In fact, and he's quite gifted at it.
what a guy. What a guy.
he missed his calling.
He
He
really,
missed his calling.
I don't know. I think he's doing okay.
He is. He actually is doing okay. I love that those festival workshop stages are such a fertile breeding ground for friendships. You know, how many times have you got up there, played some music? I remember Shiny Ribs.
Yeah.
Shiny Ribs.
Yeah.
Same thing. Like we got up on stage, we started playing together. It was like, oh, we're gonna be friends forever.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
He played Pony by Genuine.
Yeah, then that's often what does it, right? Just
Just a real
how
dirty
can't you
love
love
song.
it? How can't you love someone like that?
It actually sounds like realistically what we're bonding over here is not festival workshop stages. It's just 90s R&B.
Yeah, it might be. But it was just it's true. Those at their best, those workshops can really bring because I think it is more it's like when people let their guard down, when they let the kind of performance side of what they do down, start listening to each other in when they work. And you never know when it's going to work. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's like less collaboration or whatever, but in that particular moment and in a number of them that I've done, you get that movement between that communication. That is why we're in it. It's like why
Yeah.
we play music.
Yeah.
And then you hear someone do something you don't expect and you're like, holy, this is exciting, right? It's like it puts you on the edge of your seat. It's why you make records. It's why we are in it. It's like the mystery that unfolds when we play live music together, especially when we don't know the people we're playing with and we don't know what they have to offer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know?
it's a very special thing. It's a very, very special thing.
Yeah, well,
I,
and you guys are among the top. I mean, when it comes to playing live music. Now, I mean, I guess we'll get right into it because I really want to know. Obviously, your brothers. I come from a family of four boys. I'm the youngest of four boys. I know the brother dynamic, and I played a lot with my brothers. We fought a lot too, but we'll get into that too. But like what was your child? You grew up in a musical family. Like your dad's a musician, a pro musician. Joey, maybe talk about that a little bit. The early days.
yeah, I mean, our dad was a working bass player, guitar player, keyboard player, singer, and songwriter around town when we were coming up, and he toured backing up some pretty cool artists, Amos Garrett and Ellen McElwain, rest in peace, um, and some other local heroes as well. And so we sort of grew up on that that like side man culture of like learning a show, running a show down, playing with a bunch of different people, playing with new people. So it was very much a part of the tapestry that we sort of were cut from. And we very much carried that into our own music and the way that we sort of our careers really kind of followed in that path. And the beginning of the Brothers Landreth was really only an excuse for Dave and I to make time to hang out. So, because we were just really busy with our respective side person careers and backing up other artists and playing in other bands and stuff. And so we really followed in Dad's footsteps in that regard. And I mean, I think we take it for granted because people always, especially non-musical people say, oh, that must have been wonderful. It's like, I don't know, it's just how we grew up,
Right.
like, well, I grew up listening to Mozart or like only top 40 or whatever. It's like, well, I mean, Ry Cooder I didn't get Ry Cooder until I was like 25. When I was a kid, it was just this weird music my dad loved.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then as we started to sort of make our name as artists, people would go, "Oh, you really remind me of Ry," and be like, I don't even like that music. And then, but then I'd start to listen to the record and go, "Oh, no, I love this music." It really does sneak in. And we've been sort of thinking about this a lot lately, but this whole idea that it's like, it's more just a part of our DNA, like that record collection, our parents' record collection. I can't tell you if I love that music or not, but it is a part of me, like part of us. And there's no getting around that, and I think in the early days, people would ask, like, how is it that a band from, central Canada can make these sounds? And you go, well, I never knew how to answer that, but I know now. It's like, well, we were immersed in this stuff, and it was every waking minute when the stereo was playing, it was some sort of, Ry Cooder, Bonnie Raitt, Steely Dan, you name it, like all
that classic American roots rock.
Yeah,
it's
John Hyatt.
Yeah. It is funny because when you said that, like, my family was that, like, my dad was super into musical. He like into music, but he directed musicals. Like, we listened to Fiddler on the Roof, and and then classical music, and that was it. And and then I got into jazz because I got a trumpet, and then it opened some doors. And then my mom was really into, like, James Taylor and Paul Simon, and that was it. Like, she had like 3 records, and that was what she listened to all the time. And again, like, it's one of those things you don't want to, like, you don't know how it's entered your life. But James Taylor is probably one of my biggest influences, whether I like it or not. I do love him, of course. I think he's unbelievable. But at the time, it's almost like when you say musical DNA, it's almost like it's real. It's like real DNA. It's like our DNA. We don't necessarily, we spend a lot of time denying it. And then we realize we're a lot more like our parents than whether we want it or not.
Oh,
you know
God.
What I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like there's the whole front, like, as we come to accept that I hated musicals. I absolutely hated musicals for a good portion of my life because I just couldn't suspend disbelief. And that was Dad's music. But now it moves me. They move me in this weird way, and again, but it's the same thing. Like, there's lots of parts of my father that I kind of denied in myself. Now that I'm becoming an adult and able to kind of realize that it's not entirely who I am, I still have,
Yeah.
But it's this weird process of coming, especially as you get past 25, as you start to become your own person, and you kind of go, okay, well, what parts of my parents are me, and what part now do I get to define that are my own, So, Dave, when you started playing bass, then was it like, were you watching your dad playing? Were you playing kind of like as he was playing? What was that all about?
I came to it a lot later.
Did you?
Like, when we were teenagers, I was watching Joey and my dad having a lot of fun playing music together, and I was feeling left out. As I wasn't profoundly musical at that time, I picked up the flute in grade 6 or 7 or whenever they start handing out something more than a recorder in middle school. And that is just, as try as I might, I was no Jethro Tull, and nobody wanted me to play in their rock and roll bands. So I was feeling left out. And so I wanted to be a part of what they were up to. And I don't remember if I was handed the bass or if I gravitated towards it of my own volition, but I found it one way or the other. My dad made sure I had one that I could call my own. And I went after a couple of Green Day bass lines. And once I had those sort of under my fingers, then it was time to jam with the guys. But that was very much a sort of a hobby. I wasn't serious about it. I had no designs of becoming a musician professionally at all. I just was doing it so I could hang out with these guys, so that so I wasn't missing out on the fun. It wasn't until I was about 20 or so that I was like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. But I like music. Maybe I'll do that. And that was so I came to it late. Yeah, it was a bit of a last minute decision to pivot and try.
Seemed like the safe bet. Music seemed like, that seems like a pretty safe career choice. Let's just go down the easiest path possible. Career musician.
It looked fun. Yeah, it just looked fun. And I was looking at, like, at that time in my life, I was a good student, and I came out of high school with really good grades, and I had some, decent university prospects, but I could not get excited about any of the things. I remember going through all these the syllabus for the course and going like, I don't want to spend 4 years doing this. I don't care about it. And it seemed kind of like this empty pursuit. So it was kind of rebelling against that feeling of being forced to go down a direction that was just like, this feels like a square peg in a round hole. So
right. So it became quite clear that music, in fact, was where your heart was at, though it happened a little later.
For me, it was a fake it till you make it. Like, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to call myself a musician. I have no idea what that means. I don't know anything about this. And I just started going down that road very confidently. And then a year or so into that decision, I turned around and was like, oh, I guess I'm a musician now. Like, people are calling me for gigs and I'm playing all the time. I guess I'm a musician. I guess I did it.
I still find myself reevaluating that decision. Like, not in a bad way, not saying like, no, I want to quit, or although I do that every once in a while too, but also being like, am I still, fake it till you make it. Like, we're all just playing, and you're just like, and actually as I get older, and I think we're all around the same age, but I feel more and more grateful that I'm actually able to do this as a career. Like, I'm more and more grateful now that I'm into this next stage where I am a little older. Maybe we're not coming out of a pandemic, but whatever. After the last couple of years, there has been a shift in my thinking where I'm like, holy, this is actually starting to look like a career, and that it's now not just a hobby for 10 years. We're into the next decade, and we're into the next little bit. And I think I'm taking stock of that a little bit more and being like, man, what a weird and lucky thing to get to do. When you're looking at that syllabus, right? When you're looking at that syllabus, like I think I was too, man. I thought I was going to law school, But then I thought, ultimately, if I could fake it, I'd try music for as long as they let me do it. Yeah. And I keep on thinking they're going to close the door, and then I keep on sneaking in another year or two. You know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy.
I think about this all the time. Like, there's for all the people that set out and be like, I'm going to do this. And it's easier to say that when you're in your teens or your early 20s and there's nothing riding on it. You don't owe anybody anything. You're not accountable. You don't answer to anyone. But like, here we are 10, 15 years into playing music as a career. And it's a war of attrition. Like, if you can suffer the slings and arrows long enough past a certain point, you stop and look behind you and go, well, that's the worst of it. Like, I'm here, I got this far. And now maybe you're lucky enough to be paying some or most of, or maybe even all of your bills playing music. And you've kind of got through that rough climb up the road. And not that it's like smooth sailing the rest of the way, but it's, if you can hang in just long enough, I think that's the thing that gets most musicians, is just that first stretch is a real grind. It can be a real tough road.
For sure. And it goes in these ways. Julie Dwyer and I were talking about this recently, just about how, she's now she started when she was 18. This is now the beginning of her 4th decade playing music professionally. Wow. And that takes a lot. As you said, war of attrition, there's always things that come up. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter who you talk to, however long they do it. It is this thing where you look in the background and you go, oh my gosh. But what I'm so fascinated about in having these conversations is, how do people overcome those hurdles as they face them? We've all faced hurdles in the last couple of years, but sometimes it's hurdles before that. Sometimes it's physical health hurdles. Sometimes it's mental health hurdles, big hurdles that are really tough in a creative career and really tough in a public career. Really tough when you're going out on stage every night and you're jamming and you love music, but all of a sudden that feeling is a little further away because you're preoccupied with bigger things that are right in front of you, And so these conversations have been amazing for me, just to kind of, because I too have had a lot of these issues over the years, you know what I mean? And overcoming them and figuring out, okay, what do I need to do to bolster into the next, as you said, I love that, to like get through it and then keep on doing it. Like, I got a little sign, my daughter made me a little sign on my thing. It just says, don't quit. And I'm kind of like, and I'm kind of trying to stick with it. You know what I'm saying? It's like more like, because a lot of it is just like, okay, how to figure out how to keep the well going, how to keep it deep, how to keep the source of inspiration, how to keep that excitement, that feeling that we all felt when we were on that workshop stage where it's new, it's fresh. Your ears are fresh. You're engaged in music like that first time your parents were playing you a record, or when you rediscovered the music when you were 26. How to keep that fresh state of mind as a creative person, it's everything. It's everything, right? We see the older people that we admire, and you think, man, listen to how well they play. Listen to how much they still listen. Listen to how locked in they are, you know? So Joey, like who do you hold up? Like who are some of your mentors, and what do you do to kind of keep yourself fresh musically and creatively, spiritually?
Oh man, such a wicked question. And I think well, I mean, in terms of my heroes, oh man, honestly, right now it's my daughter, who's 1, and I've learned, I mean, as I think any new parent does, the learning curve in that first chunk of time, and I'm sure what defines my first chunk of time is I still have lots of time left in that. But the learning curve was so massive, and my whole world was flipped upside down by watching her get her bearings and realizing, like, my wife and I had all kinds of preconceived notions about what parenthood was going to be. And then we had this, my wife Anna, she said to me, you know, I was waiting for this moment when the doctors handed me the baby, and I was waiting for this moment to go like, it's you who's been growing inside me this whole time. And she was like, I looked in her eyes and I was like, I have no idea who you are. Like, you are not familiar to me in any way. And not like in a, like, oh my God, what have I done? But just like she was waiting for this profound recognition, and it wasn't there. But what was replaced by that sort of yearning for this recognition was like, oh, I cannot wait to find out who you are. Mm-hmm. And through this whole process of watching her slowly become this person who's going to, I know is going to continue to evolve over time, has really smashed my idea of who I am as a person and as an artist and as a human in this world. And the sense of wonder that you watch as a child discovers their environment is really profound. And I realized that I've been trying to manufacture these moments, these special moments that you're talking about. That moment on that workshop when we all connected, we knew exactly what we were going to do. And you know, we take this massive ship that's got 7 or 8 people on it, all complete raging individuals, and we all manage to steer it in the same direction. How do you manufacture that? And it's, the thing is it's not manufactured. It's just a response. And I think what I've learned definitely in these last 2 years and the last year since my daughter Joni was born, but something that I've been moving closer, or moving in the direction of, is you can't actually physically steer the ship, because the second that you try and stand behind that steering wheel, the whole thing's going to go off the rails. When it comes to art, you just have to let it happen. And I think there are things that you can do for your mental health that are going to enable, pardon me, that window to be to like very roughly quote Tom Waits, to be the windowsill that the bird wants to land on. There's all kinds of things that you can do to take care of your heart and soul in order to make sure that you're there. But I mean, I've spent my entire career as a side person, like sharpening my tools as a guitar player and a singer, and practicing and spending countless hours in the woodshed. But there's a point when you realize that your skill set has nothing to do with your artistry. And it's the same thing that makes Bob Dylan a brilliant artist, but he's not a very good musician. But it's transcendent. His artistry is transcendent of his craft. It's a different thing completely. And nobody questions that. Nobody's going to be like, well, I wish he was a better singer. You know, nobody says that. You just accept it as brilliant, because it is. And I had this realization over this last little while of like, these things are exclusive. Like, my skill set as a guitar player does not mean that I'm going to be able to walk up to the door of great artistry and have a seat at the table. And vice versa. Just because somebody didn't spend 20 years working on their craft does not mean that they're not going to fit right in. So it's something else. And I think that for me, what I've realized is that it's an eagerness to just participate and to try to let go of preconceived ideas like, oh man, I can't wait till we get to the four chord. I'm going to play this thing I've been working on. You know, the second that you do that, it's not beauty anymore. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from these days. And I mean, I've been saying, I'm practicing less than I ever have in my whole life. I just like, you know, having a 1-year-old is insanity. And as you, I know, you know, but I think I'm playing and singing and doing my thing better than ever. And I think it's because there's none of that stuff can really get in. I don't have the time or the energy. And so I think that there's like this moment where you let go and you just go, I'm just going to let be what's going to be. And just accept that I put my time in. So I know that I'm good at what I do. And I just have to, you literally, for me, this is, you know, my own concept here, but just ride on those laurels and then let the rest just be a spontaneous thing.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. I mean, it's a great way to look at it. I think, you know, like I talk about meditation a lot. I love meditation, and in most faith traditions, there's this concept of like a childlike mind, of an openness to rather than judging or being concrete in our analysis of how things are. This is it. This is this. This is this. I think it speaks to what you're talking about too. Children don't see the world like that. They're participating in this really incredibly open way. And we look at it and we're like, it's kind of scary, right? We're like, oh my gosh, I hope they don't get hurt.
Yeah.
Because that can hurt you. That kind of openness is like the instinct is to then become more fearful and retreat into the things we know, only the things we know, and kind of over time become more stoic, you know, more closed, more rigid, you know, and, you know, whereas I think some of the, you know, the goals that we talk about a lot is more like fluidity, you know what I'm saying? And openness, softness, which are the characteristics of a child.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of what we think of in, especially in that first stage. You know, I now have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and things start to change a little bit, you know, but, and I certainly have changed a lot. And our tendency, of course, as we become more close, as you said, you know, it's more like, okay, I know what to do now. Over the four chord, I'm going to do this. That, I would say, that is kind of what you're saying. It's like, that's actually a closing of the mind based on what you know. Whereas there is this stage in creation where you need to just be open to the flow and know that you actually can't control everything. Just like you were saying with that ship, right? It's like you go in and you try to control every little detail. And I've done this. I think we've all done this. And you stop getting what you want out of the people you're working with, out of yourself. You know what I mean? Like I sometimes finish shows and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd done this, did this. And I'm like, well, but at the same time, there's so much I can't control. I'm really trying to get into that even from the perspective of the show, is like when you see that confidence on stage of great artists that can let go, and you know, actually they've actually stepped back from knowing even where it's going to go. I think that's why people relate to the Grateful Dead in a lot of ways, is because there's this ridiculous openness, and some people see it as being totally scrappy, but often it looks like a lot of fun for someone who plays music. It looks like, if you're a musician, what other band do you want to be in? But be in the band that everybody's like, yeah, let's go, let's friggin' play. Like, I am going to be the most active bass player there is, and it's going to be awesome, you know. But there's something really beautiful about it, and that it's this kind of like moving. It takes on these risks and is open, and so I really appreciate that answer. It's funny, because I think about that a lot, and the idea of controlling the ship is a big one. So I'd be curious, you know, Dave, how what you would think about, you know, approaching some of that in your own life. Again, just kind of keeping yourself fresh. How do you keep yourself fresh?
The shower daily.
Yeah, that's key. Habits.
No, you know, I think what I don't know that it's necessarily about keeping fresh, but what keeps me keeps me moving in what I feel like is the healthiest way is always when I am practicing gratitude, like very deliberately. And and I believe that it's a muscle that you need to flex. And it's I think it's what helps me the most. And I go pretty far out of my way um, to try and remind myself of all the little things that I have to be grateful for, um, and to focus on those things. And I find that that kind of energy is very contagious, and that it kind of spawns more gratitude and more positivity, and it makes it a little easier. And before you know it, when I feel like I'm doing that well, it becomes very involuntary, where you just it's no longer difficult. You are just spotting those things, and you are finding those little moments and going, oh man, I'm really lucky to do this. I'm lucky to be in this room with these guys. I'm lucky to still have a career after 10 years. I'm lucky that people still want to hear our music. I'm really grateful for the fact that we all bring this wonderful attitude to the band, and everybody's trying really hard. I'm grateful that my family's healthy. I'm grateful that I have this house to live in. I'm grateful that I have this wonderful love in my life. Like, you know, that it's, when you really start digging into it, the list is endless. And I often look at people struggling, and you wonder, like, it's so often just a question of perspective, you know. And I mean, that's not to say there is absolute suffering in this world, without a doubt. There is, like, you know, there's relative poverty, and then there is abject poverty, and that is, you know, that is not a question of perspective. There is true suffering and sadness, but I think for most of us, it's a question of, like, there's a lot of choices that we can make about what parts of our life we want to get fixated on. And yeah, and so I don't know, that's been helping me lately, certainly, you know, with the pandemic, and relinquishing a lot of control in places that we took for granted, you know. Like, not, I certainly don't want to go down this road too much, because I feel like we've all talked about it to death, but, like, you know, we took tour dates for granted in a way. Like, when you had a show booked, that show was happening, man. Like,
Yes.
rock and roll will persevere. That was always the mantra, right? Like,
Yeah, unless you have to flake out.
the show must go on. You don't often flake out, but, you know, occasionally. But I mean, for the most part, that was like, you know, you got tour dates on the books, they're happening. And then suddenly that was something that just, it fell as easy as a feather blown over. And that really rocked my world, for sure, because that felt like such a concrete thing. Yeah, so
Yeah, it was a concrete thing to every day. It gave to the schedule, just the actual rhythm of the day.
mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing too, right? It gave people a certain direction. If you were on tour, it was like, okay, we're going to go here, then we're going to do this. We kind of know what the rhythm of the day looks like. All of a sudden it's gone. So there's a huge readjustment in terms of evaluation of purpose and all those things. And now we're getting back to doing gigs, and I kind of feel the same way. It's like every gig, I'm like, guys, when this gig is done, we're going to be really grateful that it happened, because we don't know if it's going to happen until the thing is done. Literally, like, hey, we might do the sound check and we don't know if this is going to happen. So let's just take it for, but as you said, like, the gratitude thing is interesting, because I almost feel like I probably said I was grateful, but I didn't necessarily make it a practice. Yeah. You know, as you said, you made it a deliberate practice of it. And I actually think that that's pretty key, is, again, like, putting it into the rhythm of the day, and you start to realize as you do it, it's not just like a side thought, but you take a bit of time and actually go through that exercise. It is quite powerful. It's quite powerful, just as how you interact with, again, like, with the small things, with the ability to play music, the ability to have these conversations, all these things that I think I would have said, yeah, I believe in gratitude, I do that, you know what I mean? But I don't know if I wasn't putting it into my routine. You know what I mean? It becomes quite different once you actually deliberately do it, once you put it into the day. And again, it seems like maybe at first I thought it felt like overly scheduled or uptight or something, but then I started to see the benefits of how it changed my positivity, how I was interacting with my surroundings. Way more positive.
Yeah, it sure can be. And I mean, again, like anything, like going to the gym, I mean, you go through phases where maybe you're in better shape than others, or better shape than other times, you know. So it is something that I think your relationship with it will wax and wane, but it's kind of like, for me, it's more a general direction. Like if
Yeah.
I have the choice, I am choosing to head in a rough direction of gratitude.
I like
And
I like
may,
I like
yeah,
that. The humble approach. Because
right.
honestly, when you're in the dumps, you might not pull it off. Like that's just
No.
there's definitely days. It's like I want to do that. Partially I do it mostly when I'm feeling the best, as an attempt to bolster for when I feel like I'm in the total, when I'm got the blues, when I'm
You're
really
building your
down, you know,
armor.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
holy smokes, that's a lot harder to be like, I'm great. You know, it's obviously, as you said, it's perspective. It's harder when you're in it, when you're in the thick of a depression or whatever it is, to then go, oh yeah, remember, it's the gratitude thing. I got to do that list. That's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, man.
But I hear you. I like the humble approach, which is like, that's the direction you want to go. Sometimes you score, sometimes you don't, you know, but as a practice,
You
it's
shoot your shot, right?
exactly. Well, you know, it speaks to you know, making this record to a certain extent, because
Nice
you
segue.
produced this record, right? You guys made this record. Joey, you produced this record. You were the producer of this record. Did Murray produce it as well with you guys?
Yeah, I was co-pro. Yeah.
Cool. And so let's talk about, I mean, obviously it speaks to, again, like, how do you get the best out of a song? How do you get the best out of a performance? All of a sudden, as producer, that's your main priority. You've written the songs, you're performing them together, you're pumping yourselves up, but ultimately you're then steering the ship of this project. Talk about being a producer for the first time.
Oh man. Well, I don't know necessarily that the record reflects it in a dramatic way, but we underwent a pretty massive change on this record. And you know, I mean, at the risk of, you know, I'm with Dave. I don't want to talk too much about pandemic stuff, but one of the things that I gained in the pandemic was a new perspective on my own identity as a person, because I've spent the last 15 years going, I'm a traveling musician. This is who I am. This is what I do. And when things are crappy or things are not happening, at least I can fall back on that and I know exactly who I am. But when that went away, man, it was like the forever fall into darkness, and not necessarily in terms of depression, but just like, well, if I'm not this, who am I? Because I really thought I knew who I was, and now I'm not doing this and I don't know. And I'm still reeling from that in a good way, though. And I think what ended up happening for me was I realized, well, I'm more than just a traveling musician. And I realized, like, I've been telling myself stories and creating rules for myself. This is how I play guitar. This is how I write a song. This is how I put on a show. This is how I pack my bag. This is how I do. These are the things that define me. And literally to the point of like, well, what if instead of folding my clothes in thirds, I roll them instead? Oh, like, but
Transformation.
but kind of seriously, you know. And I mean,
Yeah.
like, I like to follow certain rules. And with this record, it was very much like, I have a name definitely within my community that I play guitar in a certain way and I make a particular sound. I like, you know, I'm in the guitar world, I'm known for liking fuzz pedals of a certain circuit, you know, and I like to stack up a jillion background harmonies. I love it. It's like my favorite thing in the world. There's not a ton of that on this record, because I kept coming back to like, well, what if I'm someone else?
Right.
You know, what if, and it's like, it's not that I'm not that person anymore. And it's not that I don't still love those things, but what if I just also love other stuff? I still am going to be the same guy. So producing this record was kind of or co-producing this record was a real walk through that door of starting to ask those like what if questions. And even the way we pick the material, because, you know, in the past, there are certain songs that sort of live under the solo Joey Landreth moniker, and some songs that live under the Brothers Landreth moniker. And we had a handful of tunes, and I had a handful of tunes that I was going to put on a solo record. And I played some of them for Dave, and he was like, so, like, what do you want to do with these? And I said, I feel like these are solo Joe tunes. Like, do you like them? He's like, well, yeah, I do. But, you know, I don't know if they're Bros tunes. And we just started to bat around the idea of like, well, what does that mean? What, like, these are, again, these are rules that we've put into place. Like a solo Joey Landreth song sounds like this, and a Brothers Landreth song sounds like this. Well, the Brothers Landreth is Dave and I making music together. That's it. That's the only rule. You
It can
know,
be anything.
it's not
It
the
can-
Brothers
right,
Landreth.
yeah.
If one of us is missing, that's it.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's the Brothers Landreth. So we started to go, okay, well, what happens if we take this like Joey Landreth song and start to melt it? Like, what does that look like, and how do we share the space? Because I definitely have gone in a direction to make a different sound on my own, and there are borders, or there have been borders, and this record is really trying to kind of dismantle those a little bit and sort of say, like, you know, if we played this music together, then it's our music, and that's kind of how this record has come to be. And we you know, we worked really hard to make sure that we were just really happy with everything, you know, and we weren't just going, cool, yeah, that snare sounds fine, you know, be like, no, let's work on this, you know. Actually, I mean, all the snare sounds were fantastic, but
They do actually. The snare sounds is freaking good.
yeah,
it's freaking good. I mean,
we can spend any time on the snare dance.
we can get so nerdy. I will go right down the nerd wormhole with you dudes. This is what this is about. I got all the time in the world. We can go but I feel you, dude. Like, honestly, that is one of the things you notice. It sounds sick, and the snare sound is sick.
Thank you.
But when you're talking about groove-based music, snare sound is a big, huge part of it. You know what I mean? If you're trying to make people move, if you're trying to have this, you know, a back and forth, a sway in your vibe, then making sure that the drum sound is dialed in is a good 50% of the battle.
Well,
when it comes to this sonic world it lives in.
One of the biggest things that we fought for on this record was getting the bass right. And we sat down to track the record. Before the lockdowns were really heavy, we had our buddy Emmett come and play, who's a brilliant drummer that we've played with a ton over the years. We brought him in from Edmonton to come and play, and we cut all these tunes. And we started, we took the tracks back into this room, and we started listening through everything. And we left the session really happy, and Emmett, played his butt right off. But there was something weird about the bass, and it was like, it just doesn't feel like Dave. Like, the bass playing is killer. There's nothing wrong with the playing. It just, I don't recognize this bass player. And we, it was like, there's no editing that I could do. There was no like tweaking, EQ or gain staging or whatever. There's nothing I could do that was like, this sounds like my brother. And by the time we were like, man, I think we have to recut some of these tunes. The lockdown kind of hit us really hard here in Manitoba. And so we couldn't, you could gather in bubbles, essentially. That was like you basically choose who your bubbles are, and everybody sort of monitors themselves and doesn't go outside the bubble. And so our bubble was me and Dave and Murray and our respective families.
Yeah.
And then we're like, well, like, how do we do this? Like, we can't, and then I think you were going to start talking about Aaron before.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You mentioned drums. I'll interject and just say that, like, I think drums was the turning point in this record for us. And we'll give you a little backstory. And it's been fun because over the course of the last 2 months, we've been talking to death about this record. And in the process of talking through it, we've been discovering it and sort of writing the story. As you talk about it, you make these realizations and these things come to light, and suddenly you understand it better. And then the next time it comes up, you sort of start there, and it really is becoming clear to me that was kind of the turning point for us. Our band, initially, we played with a guy in the band named Ryan Voth, and he's a guy that we grew up with, and he and I played more music with him than I played even with Joe over the course of my life. We toured in bands together, we played in bands around town, and we developed a real sound. And it was the sound of all the records up until this point. It was the first 2 Bros records. It was Whiskey, a bunch of the EPs that we've recorded, like 1,000 live shows together. And when Ryan left the band, when did he? Yeah, he sort of petered out. He came in and out over the course of the last couple of years leading up to the last record that we did. But we cut the last record together. Going into this one, we knew that we weren't going to work with him, and that to me was like, I was really lost because I didn't know how we could make a record that would sound as good without him, because we have this thing, and it's in my mind has always been the best of me. Like when we play together, that is when I go places musically. And so, yeah, we had a bit of a false start when we did the very first session for this record, and we brought in Emmett, and we weren't really prepared, and emotionally we're like really sort of like not ready for it. And we didn't get it. I couldn't get out of my own head. I couldn't find my way into the music in the session. And that wasn't the only thing too, you know, there were other things at play, but we wound up scrapping the entire thing. We cut all the tunes for the record and then threw them all out.
Wow.
Which was so disheartening. Like we got to the end of that session. I remember we went out for a coffee date with our manager. And we all sat around we went to the weirdest little cafe too. It was so strange. It's like somewhere we never ever go. I think Joey and I just were like, we need to be anonymous to have this super vulnerable conversation. We went to like a part of town that we never go to, where we like are never going to run into anybody. We sat down at this cafe, and we just like hung our heads. We're like, it didn't get it. Like we were so excited to go into this session. We were so pumped, and okay, we're going to do it. We're going to make this record. And Stu, we didn't get it. I think it's all got to go. So we went back to formula, and then
but Stu was like, guys, you will be far from the first people to throw away your record and start again, you know. And if we've spent a big part of our career kind of going, yeah, all right. Yeah. And this record was like, you know, there's a big part of this record that's a comeback for Dave and I, and it's also a bit of a redefining of what it is that we do, like all things Landreth, you know, because I do have a solo career. There has been this like thing in the periphery, not that it's uncomfortable between the two of us. Like, you know, Dave played on my first solo record. He edits virtually even if I'm the only writing credit, Dave edits everything. It doesn't, you know, it's not a weird thing, but the solo career has always just sort of been there on the periphery, and it was a really valuable thing for me to go off and do. But this time of our lives has really been about like, but I think we can scratch all of these necessary itches under one umbrella, but there needs to be a metric in place, and that metric is, are we happy?
Right.
You know, and it doesn't have to be fun, and it doesn't have to be free of struggle, but we just have to like close the computer at the end of the day and go, yep, that feels great. Mm-hmm. And that's really what this record was about for us. And that was kind of, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because I haven't really even thought of that. But when Stu said, guys, let's just start again, I was like, oh, okay.
And we did. And so we went from, you know, thinking, and then the other part of that story, and we have talked about this a lot, but like going into this record, we had this understand again with these ideas of how we define ourselves and the sort of the corners that we paint ourselves into. We had always fashioned ourselves, hey, we're a live band, because we're players, because we come from this history of like side people and working musicians. We're players, man. And like, get us in the studio, and we want everybody in the room. We're going to play it live. We're going to play it a couple of times. We're going to find the most inspired take. That's the song. And this time we abandoned that. It was really uncomfortable. And at first we were sweating in the studio. I was sweating. We're putting these tracks together, and I'm going, I don't understand how this is going to work without a drummer in the room. So we built the first track, Stay, which was the first single from the record. And we built that song in the studio, and we got it to a point where we think, okay, I think it's ready. Then we were like, who's going to play on it? And we went right to the top of the list. We're like, who do we love? We love Aaron Sterling. Aaron Sterling's one of our drum heroes. He's got so much character, wacky sounds, killer groove. Let's start there. And then, so we reached out. He said, yeah, I'll do it. We were really excited. He was also really enthusiastic, which really kind of helped sort of ease our anxiety. We sent the tracks, it was really fun, because the way he does it is he schedules a day. So you send him the tracks, and then he's like, okay, I'm going to work on it this morning. Make sure you're around. And he sends voice memos back and forth. Hey man, okay, got it. Think I'm going to do this. Okay, hang tight. And then he sent it, and we got that first drum. We were sitting there like quiet, pins and needles in the studio, me, Joey, and Murray. And we're sitting there waiting, and beat lands in the box. Okay, MP3 of a bounce, drop it. And it started playing, and we're like, oh, oh, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay, guys. It's gonna be okay. And it quickly turned from something that we were so stressed. I don't put words in your mouth. I was so stressed out about it. I was so sure that we would not be able to make a record without Ryan. That felt right. And we got these drum tracks in, and I felt this profound sense of relief. And it immediately spun from this thing that I was anxious about to the most excited part of the entire session was drum day. It was like, okay, what are we gonna get? Yeah. And we started, the first song that we built, Stay, was really prescriptive. We had the entire track mapped out. All the parts were there. Really, I think there was even a...
No, not Stay.
Not Stay?
Not Stay. No.
Never mind.
But some of them were. Some of them were really, we were really elaborate what we sent to him. But as the process went on, we were like, you know what? Let's give him as little as possible. Let's give him the vocal, a guitar, and a bass track, because I really wanted him to feel where Dave puts the beat. Because the thing is, Dave's feel, he has a very particular way that he plays, and I've like measured it. He plays like a very certain millisecond amount behind the beat, and it's like, it can be a hard thing to play to sometimes, but it's really important, and it's a part of our sound. It's part of his sound. So it's like when Aaron's listening to stuff, I don't want him just hearing the vocal and the guitar. I want him to hear where we're putting the bass to. So I'd send him that along with the click, so he kind of knows, like, hey, this is where this guy puts it. And it became really, really, really fun. And
do you mind if I grab this? I think this is our coffee.
Okay.
Yeah. We can.
We got coffee coming.
That's perfect. I'm glad we got time.
So now I want to talk about my dancing career. No.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, first of all, it's really interesting because one thing it talks about is this idea of like being okay with things falling apart for a second, right? Like, it can look like failure when you do a session and you have to can it, which, as you said, everybody's pretty much done at some point. It's devastating.
Yeah.
It's devastating. It's like you just feel like you failed.
Yeah.
Failure sucks. You know what I mean? Like, it's not fun. But often something comes out after it. But it's just like having that faith through the time of failure. Or I mean, I say that quote unquote because that's what it feels like. Of course, it's not failure. You're just experimenting, and sometimes not everything works. And then something else opens up. Like, it's great to have a manager who can say, this happens, roll with it, because when you're in it, you can feel like this record is going to be so hard to do. As you said, you're starting to feel down. You're like, look, we tried it. We can't do it with another drummer. Then all of a sudden, Aaron shows up, who is like, I follow him too, man. I'm just, first of all, like, I can't believe he plays on the record. I was so jazzed to see that. I mean, he's like, he's one of the best in the world. He's one of the best in the world, no doubt. He's extraordinary in so many different feels. So good. He's like a Keltner, and in that like really special Keltner group of drummers. There's only he's extraordinarily funny.
Yes.
He's extraordinarily hilarious.
And he is that funny too. Like, those voice memos that we got were gut wrenching.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the, excellence, right? Like, as we talk about excellence, this is what we as side musicians, you grew up as side musicians. You want to be excellent. You want to be able to jump into a session and not only bring the fire from a technical perspective, but be that person that motivates and like, you know what I mean? Who's bringing some joy to the session. So when you have someone like that, this is what I've always found amazing is when I get in sessions with that level, the very top level of players. It's only happened a couple of times. You realize that it's a lot more than just their playing.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I did this session. Dave Pilch, upright bass player. He's played with tons of people, right?
Katie Lang, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And he played on a record I did with Aaron Davis, and they were all amazing. Kevin Bright was there. I mean, it was a wicked band, and I was
Heavy.
way out. I was terrified, and I was young, but it was this like engagement. It was this engagement. It wasn't just technical mastery. It was like, I'm here. And Dave had this amazing ability to be like, tell me what you want. He was a real good listener. You know what I mean? Like, I remember at one point in the session, he kind of stopped the session and was like, I feel like we're going a little bit away from your original intent. And he knew that I was like too scared to say anything because I was a young guy, you know what I mean? Like, in a room of these older, really seasoned musicians. And I was like, man, that was super perceptive and likely why you're on Diana Krall's record, and all of like that's why you're. It's like these other set of skills beyond technical mastery, and I get the sense because people want to work with Aaron Sterling because he's an insane player, but he has this engagement with the music, with the spirit of the project.
Yeah, I think it's like it's an empathy, and I think about the times when I've nailed a session, and I think of the times when I haven't, or been like, somebody goes, hey, I want you to play on this track, and then you go and the song comes out, you listen, you're like, oh, my thing didn't make it. And then you hear the thing that did make it, and you go, I understand, I missed the mark. It's like, and when you miss those marks, it's not about you not being good enough at your craft. It's about either you understood it the wrong way, or you misinterpreted what the artist was saying, or it just didn't work out. I think there's a really important, like, again, that sense of like, you can't steer that ship. So you just go in with an open mind and an open heart. And like Aaron was trying stuff, and he would send me voice memos and be like, I think I know what you want me to do, and I'm just looking for permission to maybe not do that. I go, yeah, man. I mean, at the end of the day, if I don't like what you put down, like we'll find something else. But if you have something in mind that is different, and there were like, I can count on one hand how many revisions there were with him. And it was literally like, hey, can you cut that hi-hat pattern in half in the pre-chorus and then wait to double it up until the chorus? Oh yeah, sure, that makes sense. But there was never any like, that's not it. It was like virtually everything that he sent was a one take. Or the other thing that happened, I think twice, was, can you just give us another pass where you're just a little more adventurous, and then maybe we'll edit something in if we need a little more energy. But it was such a joy. But for me, I mean, I feel like this is just the theme of my life these days, so I wind up talking about this a lot. But it was less about everything he was playing was perfect, and it was more about me being open to the idea that he's an active collaborator on my record. And like, when left to my own devices, I am borderline obsessive when it comes to certain details. And I think I've really, part of my skill set is that I have an insatiable hunger to work at stuff. So like, I'll sing background vocals, and I'll re-sing them until I feel like the vibrato is subdivided the right way. Like I get into those kind of details, and it's not necessarily for the better. It's just like, that's kind of how I like to work on shit. But when walking into this record with Aaron was like, man, I could do that here, or I could just not do that here. And I think what we learned, like my favorite thing that happened was I opened up the audio files folder and I saw bongos on stay. And I was like, no bongo, not happening. There's no world in which I'm letting there be bongos on a Bros Landreth record. That just does not make sense. And I heard the bongos. I pulled up the fader and was like, I love these bongos. These bongos are the greatest bongos I've ever heard. Day. And that to me was like, it's kind of funny.
Now we need a full-time bongoist.
A bongist.
Yeah, that's right. Now your tour schedule, now the whole touring budget's gone out the window because you got an aux percussion person.
Yeah, exactly. We got a 4-piece band with a bongist. But it was like, it was definitely a funny thing, but it was also like, again, like one of these massive transformation moments of like, I could do what I always do, which is micromanage this moment within an inch of its life to make sure that it's exactly what I want, or I can just let this be the record that Aaron Sterling played on, and we just follow his gut. And we kind of went into the mix with Greg Kohler, who's another hero of ours, which was another swing we would have never made. But we thought, well, if Aaron's going to play on the record, let's see if we can get our favorite mixing engineer to mix it. And he was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. But it was the same thing. We get mixes back, and I go, I mean, I'm hearing things, and I could give him revisions, but like, would I only be giving revisions because I can hear something, or am I giving a revision because I actually don't like it? So I really forced myself on the first handful of mixes to try my best to just accept what I was hearing. And what I discovered pretty quickly is that man, same thing, like very, very little revisions. The one song that had the most revisions was 3 revisions, and it was change this. I'll split the difference. Never mind. Put it back to what it was.
Yeah.
And it was like that. And it was just the most rewarding experience, because now this is not the record that I beat to death and there's 27 mix revisions and 40 mastering revisions. This is the record that we made with Aaron Sterling and Greg Kohler and Joe Pasapia and a couple of our other buddies, and
everybody's a part of it, and everybody's doing their thing. It is strange, the letting go of. I actually think that part of it, I wonder if it's related, because I've been making records now during the pandemic in a similar fashion where I'm sending tracks off, and there's this to other people. And I'm kind of loving it right now. I'm the same way. We were a band that were built on live, and I love the live excitement. I felt exactly the same way. You got to be live. It's got to be like this. Then all of a sudden, I started doing it like this out of necessity, and there was something about what I was getting from people that I felt like I actually wouldn't have got had they been in the room at the same time. And I'm not saying it's better, but I'm saying that maybe I'm better.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to change.
I'm better at letting go. I'm better at being like, you know what? Let's just see what you got. Whereas maybe I would have intervened early on in their exploration, what they wanted to add to the thing, and go, maybe not. Maybe that's a little too much in the pre-chorus, or that's a little bit, let's see if we can stray from the pentatonic a little bit and get whatever. Like, give them a bit of room to explore. You know what I'm saying? Then deliver it. Like, so often when I was getting tracks from people, I'm going, I, first of all, wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
Might have actually stopped it before it became the flower that it is. And now that it's here, I'm on board. You know what the bongo thing, right? Like, had you been in the studio and he was pulling out the bongos, you would probably
be like, no. Yeah, well, let me stop you right there. No, that's good.
Hard no on the bongos, bud.
Let me stop you right there.
Did you read the
sign? In the case.
Did you read the sign? It says it right on the sign.
Listen, you put those back in the case and then get the rest of your stuff.
No bongos.
Get the rest of your stuff and meet me in the lobby. Yeah. No, it's really, really true. And I think there's so many, it comes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like, you just have so many preconceived notions about who you are and what it is that you do. And I think while certain things are really important to in maintaining your integrity, but I think when it comes to creation, those kind of restrictions are only restrictions, and I think the best art happens in an environment where it's allowed to bloom and expand in all directions. And you're right. Like, if I'd have been in the room with Aaron and he had made certain choices, I would have directed when he didn't need direction, and you never know what else kind of ways I would have messed it up. But it definitely changes how I make records now, and it's how we're going to make records moving forward. And I cannot wait to take these new skills into a full band session and just see what happens.
I kind of feel the same way. It's made me recalibrate what I feel like, because it's this balance of being really open and then having direction. You need some sort of vision. It needs to be moving in a direction, just like you said, that ship moving people. There needs to be some sort of, otherwise no one knows where they're going. But too much and you strangle the thing. It's like this. It's the same thing about trying to write a song. You can sit there and be like, I'm going to write this song right now. And if you think about it too hard, you'll never write the song.
That's my entire process of songwriting. I just sit there and get frustrated until somebody comes and helps me save it.
It's like loose directions, like we said earlier. You're heading in the rough direction of a thing. Like, maybe it's instead of being like, we are heading to 463 13th Ave Southwest, you're like, we're heading west.
Yeah.
We're heading towards the mountains, or we're heading towards the sunset, whatever, as opposed to being like, I know where we're going to land. Because and these are all old adages. We know them to be true. It's the journey, not the destination, right? Don't be afraid of failure. We learn more from failure than we do from success. Practice gratitude, be open. Like, they come back to these real simple ideas that can be so hard to get to, but they're so rewarding. And they really are. Like, you could like write the entire manual to living living life on like a napkin. You know what I mean? Like it's all that simple. It's all that straightforward.
Just so hard to do. It's just so hard to do.
It's so hard to get out of your own way. It's so hard
it's so hard to get out of your own way,
ego.
Man. Absolutely. And that's a big part of it is, as you said, letting, like, there's a great saying in Buddhism called not too tight, not too loose. It's like when you're walking across a room with a spoon full of water. And if you hold your spoon like this, your hand's going to shake and the water's going to go away. If you hold it too loose, the water's going to spill everywhere. There's this place where you can walk across a room holding a spoon, not too loose, not too tight. And it's essentially like a metaphor for how one should live. And it's really interesting. It speaks to a bit of that. It's like trying to figure out that balance.
That balance.
Getting out of the way, but being a bit of a leader, or being a producer, or being, relevant.
I think a really big part of this sort of like the napkin life manual, an important piece that's missing is like, it doesn't always have to feel good, and I think we put this pressure on ourselves that we have to, like, okay, I have to play the best that I possibly can, and I have to entertain the best that I can, and I also have to be happy all the time. And none of those things are realistic. And what I noticed for myself is that in the process of trying to achieve all those goals, what would happen is that, like, if I wasn't playing the best that I was, then it messed with my entire identity of who I thought I was. Because, like, I have this idea, I am a skilled musician. And so if I don't play well, then that messes with that idea that I'm a skilled musician. And all of a sudden I'm doubting and judging myself for every mistake that I make. And, I'm a good entertainer, but what happens when I do a bad job of my job? Because it's going to happen. It doesn't mean that I'm any less worthy of doing that job, or it doesn't mean that I should quit or not play tomorrow night's show. It just means, hey, you had an off night and forgive yourself. And then you're not always going to be able to wake up and go, man, I can't wait to do this. Sometimes it's a grind, and that's a part of it. And I think that's also fits in with that not too tight, not too loose, is like, you can't have too many preconceived ideas of how this stuff is going to go, because it's not going to go the way that you want it to. And as soon as you kind of go, let's see what happens, that to me is the sweet spot.
Yeah, right.
And with this record, not every single part of it was like, wow, we're just swinging for the fences. Like we had to fight for stuff. We re-recorded the bass on one tune like 3 or 4 times, and like I wasn't nailing the tone, and we kept trying, and was like, well, let's go across the hall where our buddy Paul, who's engineered a lot of our stuff in the past, he gets great bass sounds. And it was like, I got to hop off my pride and just go, I'm not getting it. That's okay. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be a great bass track, and it's still not going to be my record. We went across the hall, nailed it. Great. Okay, wicked. Hey, can you record this song and this song too while we're at it? I don't know. You just got to be open.
It's all well, and then you get surprised. Not to make another little turn into, a relevant question, but then all of a sudden you find out that Bonnie Raitt sung one of your songs.
Right.
You never know where the big moments are going to come. You don't know. That might have happened after the worst day ever, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, that's pretty insane. How was that? Finding out that Bonnie Raitt.
You don't get to dream that big. You don't get to dream that big. You don't like
no,
that,
true.
And that's just that's as simple as it is. Like, that is so far beyond the imagination of young musicians or musicians at this whatever stage it is that we are. Like that is just another planet of whimsy that you would never give yourself the permission to wander into. And we're not guys who write songs for other people. We write just enough songs to make our records. We are not prolific writers. I can't say this enough. I mean, when it comes time to make another record, we sweat for every song, and we dig the corners of every line that we've ever written, trying to patch stuff together. And we just make the songs for the record. Every time we make a record, we're writing just enough songs to get the record done.
This is the first record where we had a surplus of songs, and there was, I think, maybe 2 or 3.
I think
was it 1?
2 or 3? Okay, somewhere between 1 and 3.
Having an argument with somebody not too long ago. They're like, "Come on, you've got, like, between the two of us, there are six records under our sort of collective names, 7, I guess, if you count whatever." And it's like, so you can't say you're not prolific. It's like, no, but literally, if you add up all the songs on all the records, those are all the songs I have. That's it. That's it.
Um,
And I don't even like the first 10 anymore.
the Bonnie thing is just, it's a dream come true. It was an incredible feeling. And to hear her sing our song when we finally got a chance to listen to it, before it came out, they sent us a sneak peek, and it was just, we talked earlier about like the feeling of listening to music growing up, and Bonnie Raitt, Nick of Time was a record that was on our stereo, like permanent rotation on our stereo at home. And to hear that voice, her voice singing one of our songs, was just a trip. It was absolutely out of this world. And you know, we sort of hinted at it a number of times, like all three of us have sort of said, you know, in moments of doubt. I joke, but sometimes I think about quitting. But we do. We do. We have these moments of self-doubt and darkness, and where you're like, am I inadequate? Do I belong here? I feel like I'm a pretender. And a moment like this, like, you know, I'm sure I'll find a way to still question myself, but there are these handful of things we go, okay, well, that happened though. And she didn't do it. She didn't pick our song so that we could get a little pick me up. She picked it because she felt like it was the right song for her record. And that is literally one of our biggest heroes, sort of plucking one of our tunes. And it's like, I know there are going to be moments coming up when I'm digging to get through whatever the next hurdle is. Like we talked about before, they sort of ever present challenges coming up, that I'm going to lean into that one. I'm going to be like, oh yeah, that happened. So maybe it's all right, you know,
because you can't take it away. It happened, as you said, you know, it happened.
Yeah.
I think I found a lot of times during the pandemic where I was looking back at moments that I had kind of glossed over time, and I was like, oh, that happened. That was pretty cool. Oh yeah, that happened.
What were a couple that jump out to you? What are a couple of your like silver moments?
Sometimes it's just like certain tours with the band. A lot of it was like thinking about, I mean, you guys have toured as brothers for a long time. I've toured with the same two guys as a trio for over 12 years. And so a lot of it was like, oh, remember when we played, you know, before Marty Stewart in California?
Oh yeah.
You know, that's special. You're like, you know, three guys from Fredericton, and we're ripping it up in California, and then getting to see Marty Stewart, who comes out and just like, and you've probably seen Marty, like, it's, as a musician, it's insanity. It's so exciting to watch live. His show, they're such good players. They're such good singers.
Is it the Superlatives?
Yeah.
The Superlatives? Yeah. What a band. And he shows up in like the nudie suit, like head to toe, just like, man.
You know, those moments are, and then all the classified stuff, all that stuff, you know, that took place, and playing on those big shows, and moments that were just like kind of so surreal when you take stock 5-10 years later, and you're like, I'm truly in a different stage of my life. Now I have 2 kids. I'm not playing on the Much Music Video Awards anytime soon, but I did, and it was super fun, and I was doing it with one of my best friends. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
At the time, you're like, oh, what's this going to mean? Am I going to get signed to a record contract? Does this work? Is this going to mean a bigger career? And then when some of those things don't happen or whatever, it morphs, and you can look at it in different light, and then perspective when there's no gigs, and you're kind of looking back at almost on your career as a memory, and you're like, it's pretty damn fun. Like, that was a pretty big night. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think that's kind of like, honestly, to me, that is the meaning of life. And like my first 10 years of my career was like, gotta grind, gotta make it. We're going to make it. And then now it's like, we've made it. This is it. I weigh my success in how many photos are in my iPhoto library.
Right.
And every now and then I go back through them and go, oh man, remember that gig in Ness Creek, Saskatchewan? What a beautiful spot that was. And this workshop was brilliant, and we had so much fun. You know, that's what it's all about. And like when my kids are grown, and I can share memories with them, like that is
yeah, that's how again, and this is it. And it's special. It's weird. It's a weird career. Not everybody gets to do it. It's an exceptionally strange career to get to do. And as you have kids, and I live in a smaller town, and where there's, you know, it's a weird career. You know what I mean? Like, and the kids know it when they tell their other classmates it's their dad's a musician or their mom's a musician or whatever. And it's like, and the longer you get to do it, I agree. Now I'm more in this is it. And it's pretty good if I get to pay my bills, you know? And then you get these beautiful moments, you know, where a hero like Bonnie Raitt I was so excited for you guys.
Oh man,
I was
thank
just
you.
like literally so excited. It's a perfect fit. It works. There's a reason why she chose it because it's a great song. It sits in her world so beautifully. I love that she's just such an insane. She was at Strawberry Festival too. We did Strawberry Festival at the same time as her, and it was like a completely nuts. Seeing her was crazy. It was crazy because she sang with such ease. It looked like it was absolutely zero effort, and I was like, oh wait, that's how you do it for 40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
It's like this amazingly. It's not that it's easy. It's that it's not too tight, not too loose.
Not too loose.
Like
that's the title of the podcast.
Yeah.
It's man, she played the Winnipeg Folk Fest in 2014, and that's how we connected with her. As we met her,
Okay.
We played the first spot. She came and watched us play and hung out with us for like an hour and a half in the middle of the day before her set. And I kept trying to like, hey, I don't want to take up too much of your time. And she was like, I'm here, mother. Like,
Yeah.
hang out with me. She's totally like crass auntie. It was awesome. But when she played I Can't Make You Love Me, I wept because it was just like, it was the most beautiful. I mean, it's such a beautiful song, such a beautiful melody, such a sad story, but the way she sang it was like transcendent. And every note was the perfect length, and her intonation was beautiful, and her delivery, it was just like, I was taken there, and I was sitting there in the middle of unrequited love for 4.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's what that mastery can do. And that's art at its best, is when it takes you somewhere, man. And her music has just always done that for us. So yeah, I mean, it's a massive feather in our cap. And it is like, yeah, Dave said, like, it's gas in the tank for those times when people go like, well, you know, what does a band from Winnipeg have anything? What right do you have, you know, trying to play American music? You go, well, Bonnie thinks it's cool, so
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. No,
so you go ahead and eat your sandwich.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you know, you've seen it. You've been around long enough to see it. If you're in this for anything, if you're in this for any reasons that start to lean towards fame, recognition, money, if you're caught up in like, I need to be on the radio, I need to be number one on the radio, I need to be number one on more radio stations or views, or if you get stuck in the metrics, you're going to be miserable. Like, you have to find, like, it's a war of attrition. You got to hang on. You got to be stubborn. And in order to do that, you got to find the simple things that you do it for. Why do you do it? Because you love it, because you believe in it, because it makes you feel good, because you know that music saves lives. You know, whatever your reason is, it's got to be simple, and it's got to have nothing to do with anybody else. And because if you do that, then you can hang on to it, because you can control that piece. That's entirely up to you. And that will allow you to weather those storms. And even, you know, I say that with Bonnie is just like, that will be a thing, but even that's not ironclad. Depression or doubt will push through that barrier, will make me question.
Oh yeah, my imposter syndrome has already been like, it was a mistake.
It was more powerful than that, for sure. And so even that, and like, I can't dream up a more powerful affirmation. It's not about external validation or affirmation. It's got to come from like so deep down that you want it, that you believe in it, that you know that it's right for you, and you're allowed to change your relationship with that over time. But
Amen. No, that's the truth. It's absolutely the truth. And that's why it's so nice to see older musicians, I think, is they get that more than anybody. They understand that. They've been through it. And if you get stuck in the metrics, it's a game of disappointment, because it will never be enough.
No.
We've been in those conversations. You've heard those conversations, and
we've lost friends to those conversations.
It's very tough, because their metrics for what success can look like. I remember being in meetings and hearing people talk about sales numbers as if they were dreadful sales numbers, and I was looking at them as if they were completely mind-boggling. And I'm going, what scale are you guys on? Like, what is a successful record to you? Because 500,000 copies sounds like a lot to me.
Man.
Like what you know, because everybody's got a different metric, everybody's playing a different game. There's almost like, wow, let's set them up for disappointment, and then you're 2 records into your deal, and it's just like, it's kind of again like, don't quit. It's like, holy, there's so many people will give you a lot of reasons to quit, as you said. They'll give you a lot of reasons to judge yourself and go, it's not working or whatever. So if you don't find that thing, that's beautifully said, man. I think it's, and you know, all that aside, you know, the beautiful thing is we get better. We get better at playing music. We get better at listening. We get better at being human beings, hopefully. But like listening to you guys play together from that first day, you're world class. You're world class, and it's because of that. It's real music. And I'm not saying it's just like there's a real musicianship to it. It comes through on the record, especially on the new record. It's really, really strong musicianship. I love the live videos. But it's what I've always resonated with is that there's this real connection to what you're talking about. The thing that when I watch you guys, I know you're going to do it forever, and that's what I want when I watch. It's what I see when I see Bonnie. You know, you hope that they will always be there making music because you're like, they represent what it feels like to play music with people and how fun that is. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
oh yeah. Bonnie, her career is, to me, that's the benchmark.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's a high watermark, but that's like that is the goal, you know,
right?
To be able to continue doing what you're doing and enjoying it. And I mean, she's playing and singing better than ever.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And most importantly, crushing it.
Yeah, totally.
Just like, gosh, do you ever wish I just hope I can sing.
Yeah.
You know, I almost lost my voice a couple years ago because of the amount I was working, or because of the stress I was putting myself under. I almost destroyed my own voice then. And I'm like, man, I'm 40. What am I doing? I want to sing when I'm 75.
How did they do it with all that booze and hard drugs? That's what I want to know.
Quit. All the ones that are still doing it quit, except for Keith Richards.
Yeah.
That's right. It is remarkable, you know, but they figure out a way to do it at I don't know, man. I mean, watching Tony Bennett sing. I saw him sing, you know, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I saw him sing in a living room. I played a Christmas party in Halifax, and he was the special guest.
Whoa.
Wow.
And he sang White Christmas in front of like 80 people, no microphone. And I was like, whoa. That's an instrument.
Heavy.
I want to know someday off air. I want to know who that party was for.
It was crazy. Some folks in Halifax with more money than I knew, and it was. But it was again. It's one of those things. You see a legend, and then it was just so beautiful. There was so much. There was so much humility to his singing, to his voice, to his approach to the audience, and so little stress in his voice, so little tension. Yeah. It was crazy. It was such a particular instrument.
That's cool.
That's another thing that I think about a lot too, sort of in this like more, sort of more ambiguous thoughts on life. But like as a young musician, anytime I saw something like that, I was immediately intimidated by it, by the greatness of it, by how far off it was, how I'd never achieve it. And now the moment I feel any sort of tinge of jealousy or intimidation, I always remember that like inspiration and intimidation are like, it's just one, you just step over a bit to the right, you know, and then you just change that lane. And once you do that, it can become reflexive where you no longer feel that intimidation. You're just inspired.
Yes.
Like, man. Hey, that's something I can point towards. That's something I want to chase that feeling too.
Yeah.
I want to feel that effortless.
I love that. And actually the jump from intimidation to inspiration is imagination.
Oh, hey,
you know,
cool.
It's being able to imagine that there's some form of that in you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like that imagination is not being like, oh man, how many times have we seen a guitar player where you're like, he doesn't make me want to play, or she doesn't make me want to play more. She makes me want to destroy my guitar. You know what I mean? It's like the intimidation factor where you're like, all right, hands off, I'm done, you know? Whereas the imagination is what makes you go, maybe if I do this, maybe if I can tap into some of that, you know? It's a beautiful thing, but a lot of it comes down. I like that. I like that. I think we got onto something there, dudes. I think we got onto something nice.
Changing the world.
Thank you guys for doing this, for taking the time. Congrats on the record. I'm excited to hear how it all does. I know it's going to do great, man. I think you've made something really, really beautiful.
Thanks,
and
Danny.
I'm proud of you guys. Thank you.
Oh, man.
I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure. And man, I just cannot wait until we can cross paths again out there on the dusty trail.
You are getting a serious hug, mister.
Good.
Or a fist bump, whatever you're comfortable with.
No, I'm ready for it all. Bring it in.
We call it the land witch.
Good.
Yeah.
The land witch.
Look out.
Good. Right on, dudes. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Peace.
David.
Bye, David. Take care, man.
Yeah.